Okay, so this is the set of pentatonic scales from 1st through 5th position, getting all the way up and down the neck. So if we're in the key of A minor, or C major, 5th fret and 8th fret, the first position is 8 5 8 5 7 5 7 5 7 5 8 5. All of the pentatonic scales have two wide patterns, two pinky patterns, and then three narrow patterns, three ring finger patterns, and then it starts over again. Two pinky patterns, three ring fingers. So there are two wide patterns, three narrow patterns, two wide patterns, three narrow patterns over and over. If you had a 20-string guitar, you would just see that pattern over and over and over again to get the same notes. So here's our two wide patterns, 8 and 5, and then the next three are narrows, 7 and 5. Ring finger are the narrows, and then back to pinky, 8 and 5. And the way all these patterns connect is the top of one pattern, so here the 8th fret is the bottom of the next one. So the second pattern is 8 and 10, 8 and 10, and then 9 and 7. And so you have three narrows. You notice you have to shift down on the third string. Because the strings are tuned differently between the second and third string compared to all the other ones, you always have to shift in this direction. The second string is a fret higher and the third string is a fret lower. So when we're going down, we're always going to shift a fret lower whenever we get to the third string in all these scale patterns. But all the scale patterns are always going to be two wides, three narrows, two wides. Here we just did three narrows. At that point we do two more wides. And when you're done with the wides, you shift up to come back to the narrows. So here's our three narrows. Shift on the third string, two wides, and shift and come back. And if you had a 7-string guitar, you'd have another narrow. If you had an 8-string guitar, you'd have two more narrows. Three narrows, two wides, three narrows, two wides. So the frets there are 10, 8, 10, 8, 9, 7, 10, 7, 10, 7, 9, 8. So the top of that scale, 10th fret, is the bottom of the third pattern. And this one's going to start with one narrow. If you had more strings below the first string, you'd have three narrows, but we're on the last narrow here. So we have two wides. That's going to be 13 and 10. And there, we shift down to get 12 and 9. So these two wide patterns, two pinky patterns, are offset by a fret, just like the other ones were. And at that point, after the wide, you shift back up and you do three narrows. So that's 12, 10, 13, 10, 12, 9, and then 12, 10, 12, 10, 12, 10. Shift down and back up for the narrows. So whenever you get done with the wides, as you're going this way across the strings, you always jump back up a fret to get to the narrows. You'll notice in the first position, which is two wides, three narrows, and then wide again, normally you would jump up a fret to get back to the narrows, but on the third string you always shift down a fret, so there's no change there on that one. Normally you'd go like this and go back to the narrows, but because of that little third string rule, where you always shift back down, it ends up staying at the same fret. Okay, so you have these three positions so far. And then, okay, and at that point, we started this one on 10 and 12, so we're going to start the next one on 12. And that one's going to start on the second narrow. So we have the second wide. We have one wide, 15 and 12. And then again, after that, we're going to jump up to go to the narrows. We have three narrows. And on the third string, you have to shift back down. So always shift down on the third string. So here's the wide. Jump back up for a narrow and down because you're on the third string. And you have three of those narrows total. So wide, narrow, narrow, narrow. If you're going this way, you can see we'd have two wides there. If we had another string tuned the same way above the E string, you'd have two wides again. And then again, three narrows and two wides. So after those three narrows, two wides. So the frets there are 15, 12, 15, 13, 14, 12, 14, 12, and then 15, 12, 15, 12. So we ended that one on the first string at 15, so we're going to start that one on 15 for number 5, position number 5. And here we're right in the middle of the narrows. So you have two narrows, 17 and 15. And after the narrows come the wides, so you're going to shift down a fret because we're on the third string and do two wides. Then shift back up and do three narrows. We only have two strings left, so there's only two narrows there. But if you had another string tuned the same way, you'd have three narrows there. So the frets there are 17, 15, 17, 15, 17, 14, 17, 14, and back up to 17, 15, 17, 15. And at that point, everything starts over again. So the 17 here is the top note in that scale is the bottom note in the next position, and the next position is the octave above where we started. So we have the same scale again, just like we had 8 and 5 down here. We're doing that same fingering, only now it's on 20 and or 21. Yeah, so 20 and 17. So 20 and 17, 20 and 17, 19, 17, 19, 17, and 20 and 17. And so the bottom of every next pattern is the top of each previous pattern. Pattern 1, if you look at the scale, it kind of goes 8, 8, 7, 7, 7, and 8. That's the bottom notes in this one. The same is true of the next one. The top notes in one are always the bottom notes in the next. So here's the first. So those are all the positions, 5 positions total. That was the key of A. If you want to do another key, just like you move the first position to any key, say G minor or B flat major, that's the 3rd and 6th frets, they work the same way. Second position starts there. Third is here. Oops, and then starts over again an octave higher. So all of these notes have the same, or all these scales have the same note. So if we're in the key of A here, the second position really just adds one note higher, but all those other notes are the same notes that you see here. If I start on here, the same notes. We just have this additional one on top. We're kind of losing the one on the bottom. When you go to the next one, you have the same notes again. Only now we have 2 more notes on top, and we're missing 2 notes on the bottom. Same thing here, we can do the same notes again. So all those are the same. Where are we here? And even on the 3rd, 5th position. All the same notes, we just keep getting some more notes on top. So really effectively, you can play all the notes in all 5 positions just by having the first position here, an octave up here, and all those other notes will be contained in the octave. So the biggest benefit of learning all these is that you get to see where all the same notes are, all on the fretboard. You get to do licks like run up the fretboard, and you know, if you're improvising, it's a little more fun to have full control of the fretboard instead of having just one position and one position. Each of those positions tends to have licks that kind of fall a little more naturally in the fingerings in each of those scales. Even though you're always doing 2 wides and 3 narrows, you have still different fingerings because the tuning on the 2nd and 3rd string is different. You're starting in different places. So like these 2 wides here are in a different fingering pattern than they are here. And like the 3 narrows here are on different frets than they are, like, you know, up here. So you get different fingerings to play the same, even though they're the same like ringing and pointer patterns. You get different fingerings to play those exact notes, and sometimes licks are a little bit easier to do with that little different fingering. Like this, up here in 4th position, this little lick starting on the 2nd string is the same notes as this in the 2nd position, 4th position up here, and 2nd position here. You use different fingers, so doing this uses 3 fingers here, where down here it uses just 2. So it's a little bit easier to do it up in the 4th position than it is here. A lot of those kinds of things that are a little bit easier to do in some positions, a little more natural to do, a little more commonly done in different positions. So when you see guitarists play and when you're learning solos by other guitarists, you'll find a lot of times these licks, even though you can play them in any position, are more commonly done in maybe, the fourth position has some licks that are more commonly done. Much more common to see that than maybe than down here. And that was the wrong lick. That's a little bit harder to reach up there. Also, in certain keys, one position is going to be a lot higher in one key than it is in another. So sometimes you run off the fretboard and you can't get to maybe the first position again up here, but you can get to the fourth position or the third or the second. And so having all those positions lets you use the fretboard wherever you want. It's really important to see that when you cycle around to that first position again, so here's first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and first again. When you get that first position, you've come full circle. So not only can you go up from the first position to the second position, but you can go from any first position down to the fifth and down to the fourth. So that works wherever you are. Wherever you have a first position, you can go down to the fifth or up to the second. So we're down here. You can go down to the fifth here. Or you can go down to the fourth here. And that gives you a complete total coverage of the fretboard all the way up and down through any of the octaves, through any of the frets. So in the next video, we'll talk about how to move the same motive patterns if you're doing something like this to any of the other positions. You can do in any of the positions. So those same little motive patterns can be moved anywhere, and we'll do a full video on that so you see how to move those things around.